Okay, kia ora and good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today on becoming a foster carer with Barnardos. My name is Claire and I am your host for today's webinar. I'm part of our foster care services team here at Barnardos, and presenting with me today are Nikki, who is down in beautiful Christchurch, and Leah, who joins us from Auckland. Our other colleagues, Kathleen and Ella, are helping us behind the scenes to bring you this webinar today. Let's start off with a whakatauki. Poipoia te kākano, kia puawai. Nurture the seed and it will blossom. This is a whakatauki that's very close to our hearts here at Barnardos, as we're here to empower children and young people in Aotearoa, and we see ourselves as their biggest fans. Let's have a look at our agenda for the next 30 minutes. We have a pretty packed agenda. Firstly, I'll give you a brief overview of Barnardos New Zealand and our foster care services before handing you over to my fantastic colleague Nikki, who will introduce you to the criteria of what we look for in foster carers. You'll be surprised at how many myths there can be around that. We'll also explore with you today the different types of fostering and why it is so rewarding to foster with us. Leah will then talk you through our robust application and assessment process, which ensures that our caregivers are prepared for their fostering journey and that placements are set up to succeed. We will then try to answer all of your questions before we share how you can get in touch with us after this session before we finish up for the day. Before we get started, please feel free to pop any questions that you might have into the chat box, and we'll try and address as many as we can later on in the Q&A session. Kathleen, next slide, please. So for 60 years, we've been part of communities throughout the motu. Today, our mahi across social services, early learning services, and advocacy for children's rights and well-being contributes to Barnardos' vision of an Aotearoa where every child shines bright. All children come into this world with a great potential with their light shining bright, and we have the right to grow up safe, loved, and with hope for the future. But the reality is that too many children and young people in Aotearoa are impacted by long-standing social and family problems that affect their everyday lives. That's why we made it our mission, our kaupapa, to be their voice and greatest friend, to shape their brightest futures and to empower tamariki to shine brighter. That's what we do every day, and we feel privileged to be doing the work that we do with children, families, and whānau. On the next slide, we'll have a look at our guiding principles. We share the set of 5 core guiding principles here at Barnardos. They define us as an organisation and the work that we do. Kotahitanga, unity. Mahi tō tika, do the right things well. Kai kōritanga, progress with purpose. Ata whakarongo, hear with intent. And maiatanga, realise potential. Each one of them is so important in working with each other and families and whānau, especially during the crisis that we're going through right now, but also any other day of the year to shape brighter futures for all tamariki. Let's have a closer look at our foster care services on the next slide. We provide foster care families for children who find themselves unable to live with their birth families for a variety of reasons. Most children who come into our care are referred to us by o rangatahi, the Ministry for Children, because their parents or whānau are unable to care for them at that time, or because they are at risk of or have suffered long-term neglect or abuse. And we work closely with the Ministry, who maintain legal responsibility for any child in foster care. They decide when a child requires care and how long that care should last for. Barnardos works together with o rangatahi to ensure the best outcomes for children who need our support. Let's have a look at who can become a foster carer. So for that part, I will hand you over to my lovely colleague, Nikki. Nikki, take it away.
Thank you, Claire. Kia ora koutou. My name is Nikki, and I've been working with Barnardos for about 4 years. And today we are busting some myths around fostering, and I'm sharing some insights into who can become a foster carer with Barnardos. Kathleen, next slide, please. You have probably all heard a few misconceptions around fostering. Some of these are, Foster caregivers may not have a say in the placement type or the age and gender of the child they care for, that there are age restrictions on becoming a foster carer, that you may be either too young or too old, that foster carers need to be either married or in a relationship, or that they must have parented before, and that they need to own their own house. I could go on and on and on. The reality is, at Barnardos, we have a very diverse pool of caregivers, which include families from a variety of ethnicities and cultures, including New Zealand European, Māori, Samoan, South African, American, Indian, and British. Our caregivers are also from varying professional backgrounds. We have stay-at-home parents, teachers, psychologists, lawyers, doctors, nurses, and retirees. We have young and older solo caregivers, whānau placements, couples with no biological children, and families of all different shapes and sizes. We also have foster families made up of siblings and cousins, or couples who foster with the support of their own parents who enjoy the role of grandparents. All of them have the same desire, which is to provide a safe, loving, and nurturing home. Barnardos welcome foster carers from all walks of life and celebrates diversity. Time, energy, and the ability to provide a loving home are the most important things we look for in our foster carers, along with a willingness to understand and meet the needs of a child who has experienced trauma. Many children who need foster care bring with them life experiences that can make life challenging for them. They need a home that can provide consistent, responsive care and attention to help them make sense of their world. And they need people around them who will believe in their strength and potential. And we will help you with our 24/7 support. Let's move on to the different types of care. There are many different types of foster care, from respite care, which can be anything from 1 night to 28 days, to short-term, medium-term placements, which usually last anywhere between 1 to 6 months. Transitional placements are where a child or a young person requires a home until they can safely return to their whānau or until a home for life is found for them. Long-term care or permanency, as it is known, is a care placement for the young person until they reach independence. To support care placements, we factor in consistent respite for caregivers and children. This can be a really nice way for foster children to have strong relationships with other carers and for foster families to re-energise. As you see, the type of foster care that we provide also comes in all shapes and sizes. We have a very robust matching process for our placements, as we are passionate and committed to finding the right home for children requiring care and also for foster carers and their families. Let's now talk about why you should foster with us. We will always support you, both through your application process and as a foster carer. You will have access to an experienced and knowledgeable foster care social worker. Every foster carer has their own allocated social worker who they can work closely with and are able to establish a trusting and supporting relationship with. 24/7 support from our team. We have an on-call social worker who is always able to support you when needed. Invitations to carer events where you can meet and network with other foster care parents in your region. Fortnightly board payments to cover essential costs for any foster care in your care, any foster child in your care. Ongoing training and resources including 2 full days induction training focusing on child development and attachment. Understanding and managing behaviour and how to support children in the healing process after experiencing trauma. We also ensure that we are culturally aware and competent to support children from ethnicities other than our own. Additional training includes first aid, trauma-informed care, PACE parenting strategies, alongside access to all of the Fostering Kids Network training modules. You see, we are all in this together. Now, that is all from me. Back to you, Claire.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, please now let me hand you over to our other fantastic colleague, Leah. Leah will talk you through the application process. Over to you, Leah. Are you there, Leah?
Apologies about that. Hi there, my name's Leah. I've been at Barnardos for about 3 years. I'm just going to walk you through the application and assessment process to become a caregiver with us. Kathleen, next slide, please. The caregiver application process happens in well thought out stages. We are passionate about making sure we have the right foster family for the children we work with, and this includes ensuring our foster carers are well prepared for their journey. If you'd like to become a caregiver, you'll need to go through our application process. First, get in touch and speak to one of our social workers who will help you decide whether caregiving is right for you. We will explore all caregiving options with you and look at your suitability. We will discuss the necessary checks that will be carried out and explore your motivation to foster children. After the phone screening, we will provide you with an application pack. Next, once we've received and have reviewed your application, we will have an initial in-home visit where we will discuss any further questions you have and also explain how the Barnardos foster care team will support you. We will also assist you to complete a range of checks required under the Vulnerable Children's Act, including a police check, MSD check, medical and reference checks. Following this, if it is agreed that the application will proceed, we will invite you to attend our 2-day training sessions. The full assessment will then commence, which includes approximately 6 to 8 additional visits, which include in-depth assessment interviews, an interview with family and friends. The assessment interviews will approximately take about 8 weeks, including sometimes 6 to 8 visits and a visit with your friends and family. Throughout this process, your assessing social worker will be available to answer questions that may come up and to reflect on your suitability, motivation, and desire to embark on this journey. This is a 2-way process and is designed to fully prepare you for accepting your first placement. The last step, once we've completed all our checks and assessment, is for our foster care panel to make a final decision on your application. I understand the panel can sound daunting. Please don't worry, you will of course be supported by your social worker, and the panel are there to celebrate your contribution to the assessment process. Overall, this assessment process can take approximately 4 to 5 months from the date of your initial inquiry to completing all the trainings and interview assessments before then proceeding to the panel. Phew, that was a lot of information to process in one slide. Let's finish off with some words from one of our current caregivers. Next slide, please. She shares, fostering can be very demanding, but also hugely rewarding. Every child deserves to be safe and nurtured. Unfortunately, not all children experience this. Regardless of the situation, I am glad we can provide stability, safety, and care for our children for as long as they need it. This is so beautiful and truly reflects what it means to foster with Barnardos. Let me now hand you back to Claire for the next section.
Thank you, Nikki and Leah, for all the wonderful insights that you've shared with us today. All right, now we're going to dive straight into all your wonderful questions that we have floating in. I can see there's a few questions here. Our first question is maybe for you, Nikki. Can the child in my care attend the local school in my area?
Thanks, Claire. Great question. Okay, so yes, usually children are enrolled in a school that is in the foster care as a local community. Schooling is considered as part of a child's care plan and is discussed and agreed upon by the child's oranga tamariki social worker, the child's caregiver and their whānau. So if it is logistically possible for the child to remain in the school they are familiar with, we will try and support this. There are lots of things to consider when making this decision.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. The next question that we have is around the biological family. So maybe if Leah, you could answer this one best. It says, will I have to have contact with the biological family?
Hey Claire, thanks. That's a really relevant question that we hear quite a lot. As a Barnardos caregiver, the contact and communication with biological family will be managed through your social worker and the child's social worker at Oranga Tamariki. So there's no requirement for caregivers to have direct contact with biological families.
Okay, thank you, Leah. That was really helpful. The next question that we have here, maybe this could also be answered by you, Leah. Will my information remain confidential?
Thanks, Claire. Yes, definitely. As caregivers, your information remains confidential. So we definitely understand the importance for you and your whānau to feel safe and secure while caring for foster children. So we, as your agency, ensure that that's the case.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Leah. The next question that we have is, if I have a friend or relative coming to stay in my home for a holiday, is this an issue? Okay, let me answer this one. It's most definitely not a problem to have friends or family stay with you when you're a foster carer, but anyone over the age of 18 that comes to stay in your home when you have a foster child in your care must be police checked. If you have friends or relatives that live overseas, your allocated social worker can support you to complete the necessary documentation. And if they're from New Zealand, then this is quite straightforward and it can be done relatively quickly. And the checks also last for 2 years, which is great. The next question that we have is one that we hear quite often. It's, what happens if a placement doesn't work out? Leah, would you like to answer this question?
Thanks, Claire. I think it's a really valid question. I know it's a bit of a worry for a lot of our applicants. So we kind of start to manage that right from the assessment process. So throughout the assessment, we explore with you what would indicate a placement wasn't working for yourselves and your whānau, and then this information would be used for matching of the placement, the support that you receive, and enabling our team to work with your whānau should it look like things were heading that way. Although there are times when placements don't work, and for a variety of reasons, as Barnardos caregivers, you and the child in your care would receive ongoing support to get through any challenges.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leah. Nikki, there's another great question here for you. Will I receive financial support?
Great question, very important. Yes, you would receive a financial support, and these are called bed night payments, and they are paid directly into your bank account every fortnight. The amount is dependent on the age of the child and you are caring for, and is designed to cover daily living costs.
Okay, thank you. If you just hang around, would you like to answer the next one as well? It's another important question that we get often. Can I get after school care, holiday programs and or daycare for a child in my care?
Thanks, Claire. We understand that lots of caregivers have pre-existing commitments and often work full-time or have other children in their care, and that this means they'll need to utilise daycare, after-school care and holiday programs in the area. This is often a really nice way for children to socialise and forge friendships and become familiar with their local community. This is usually agreed upon as part of their childcare plan and is discussed prior to the child being placed with the caregiver. So in terms of the financial implication of this, this is agreed upon in partnership with Oranga Tamariki. It is not the responsibility of the caregiver.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nikki. Leah, I think the next one would be a good question for you to answer. Can I take the children in my care on family holidays?
Claire, thank you. Yeah, we definitely have quite a few families that go off on holidays, and we love it when the children are given an opportunity to be included in those plans. We do have to get permission from Oranga Tamariki social workers, so we always advise that foster carers gain that permission before making their plans. If the holiday is overseas, it's a little bit more complicated. So again, the sooner that those discussions can be had, the better to avoid any disappointment. Also though, if for some reason it's not possible for the child to go with you, Barnardos could arrange a great respite option for the child.
Okay, great. That was a really helpful answer. Thank you, Leah. So we'll probably take 2 more questions for the day before we finish off. This one here is, if I form a strong bond with the child, can I have the child permanently in my care? Leah, would you please answer that question?
Hey Claire, that's a bit of a tricky one, but I'll try my best. So every child's permanency plan is different and has to consider many factors. So Barnardos foster care primarily offers care placements to support children and their whānau in the hope that they'll be reunified if it's deemed appropriate and safe. If that's not possible, then further exploration of all other permanency options are explored, and that can include the care placement that the child's in or has been in previously. So again, many factors are taken into consideration when making such an important decision, and that would include the child's attachment to their caregiver, their cultural and identity needs, alongside their health and wellbeing needs over their lifespan.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. The last question that we have is, can I foster children of a specific age or gender? Nikki, would you be able to answer our last question for today?
Sure, thanks Claire. You will discuss the age, gender and placement preferences with your allocated caregiver social worker, and you'll be supported by your social worker to explore the best potential match for a child requiring care, yourself and your family during the assessment process. This will also be reviewed at the end of each placement. Foster care placements take into consideration the caregiver's experience, skills and knowledge base, and also pre-existing commitments and most importantly the needs of the whole caregiving family.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Nikki. All right, so we've had a few questions, and I'm sorry if we couldn't answer all your questions today, but after the webinar, we will see how we can answer them later on for you after the event. So let's have a look at how you can get in touch with us before we close off our session. Sorry, next slide, please. Okay, so the easiest way to get in touch with us is by phoning or emailing one of our teams, either in Auckland, Christchurch or down in Otago. I'll leave this slide up just for a few more seconds in case anybody wanted to take any of those details down. Okay, and we'll wrap up our session today with this beautiful whakatauki. Ko te ahure o te tamaiti aroha o tātou mahi. Let the uniqueness of the child guide our work. And with that, we would like to say thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that our webinar session has been really helpful and informative to you. We'd love to hear from you. So again, if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to email us or phone us, and we will get in touch with you. Kia ora and ka kite.